We are thinking a lot about, is this a new normal? It does feel like we're in a bit of a standstill. Iran knows the Strait of Hormuz is its power, its leverage. I think it's safe to say this White House wants this war over. They don't want to spend, they want to move on. There's midterms coming. Are we headed, though, to a new normal, which comes with new metrics on energy markets and more when it comes to the U.S.-Iran relationship? And if that's true, what do you see as that new normal?
Well, if this is the new normal, I'm not quite sure it's sustainable for either country. One of the things that the Islamic Republic has learned from this crisis is they have an ability to disrupt global economies by disrupting global commerce and maritime commerce to the Gulf. And that is not going to change. One of the reasons, in my view, these negotiations are stalemated is not necessarily because of the nuclear issue, although there are many disagreements between the two sides on that. But moving forward, the Iranians believe they have a right to have a say in what goes through the Gulf and what stays out of the Gulf. And that includes perhaps monetizing their geographic position, charging tolls for various ships and so forth on some kind of a discriminatory basis, and the basis of that discrimination being politics. So they have learned that this new situation gives them leverage, a security guarantee. And unlike nuclear weapons are something that they could not really use. No country can use it effortlessly. But, blocking straight traffic is something they can do whenever they wish, as they are doing it now. So we're in a situation where status quo ante, in my opinion, is not really to be recreated. And maybe the president knows that, maybe he doesn't.
So
interesting.
If that's not to be recreated, then how does the U.S. and how do the U.S. and Iran move past this standstill that we're seeing right now?
The only way the Gulf can be secure, the only way traffic can get through Gulf with some degree of confidence of safe passage would be considerable concentration of American naval assets for a prolonged, if not indefinite, period of time. That is not a commitment that the president has asked the American people to make, but that would essentially ensure that an international waterway is operated free of Iranian hazards. Besides that, you're going to have to come to some agreement with the Iranians where they have some leverage over what gets through and whatnot. But also, there's a considerable cost to the Iranian government themselves. Right now, we're playing this game. Both countries are imposing costs on each other. Obviously, the United States can impose significantly more economic costs on Iran than Iran can on the U.S. But the question isn't the magnitude of the pressure that we can impose and they can impose. The question is which body politic is better prepared or more willing to endure that pressure. United States with higher gas prices or Iran with a crumbling economy. That's the contest, and I'm not sure if the president have prepared the public for that particular context, the way the Iranian government is trying to do with however degree of success with its own people.
So, Ray, is it more about then, it's interesting what you just said, it's not about Iran necessarily having nuclear weapons that they can't really use, but this important channel, the Strait of Hormuz, and controlling that. Is this about kind of changing their economy and so being able to charge for people who go through that and then create, broaden out their economy? I bring that up because there's so many fascinating stories on the Bloomberg about, UAE and talks about a possible financial lifeline. It just struck me as odd. I just thought this whole region was so wealthy, but we also know that they've been trying to change their economy. We had another story about the Saudi Gulf, Live Gulf, right? That they're hinting, that they, I think, had talked about getting out of it or shutting it down, the losses. They've all been trying to change their economies, evolve their economies, make it less energy independent and less energy dependent. Is that what Iran is trying to do?
Well, paradoxically enough, given the fact that the sanctions that Iran has to live with, 50% of the Iranian economy doesn't rely on oil revenues. So this is essentially an economy, I wouldn't say it has diversified, but it has certainly, by compulsion of sanctions, managed to essentially develop other sectors. And whenever you have 92 million people in the country, you have a domestic economy of some sort in terms of internal arrangements and so forth. But the Gulf, the ability to exert influence over the Gulf is not just in terms of monetizing it and getting financial dividends, it's also a strategic lever. it is a strategic deterrent, because the way they essentially trying to safeguard their boundaries, their border, their territorial integrity from being attacked, as they were twice in June and March, is by playing the Gulf card. And this is not just directed against the United States. I'm not sure if the United States has an appetite for another military campaign in Iran, but it's really also directed against Israel. The Israelis do recognize that the containment of Iran will require periodic military attacks. And now I'm not sure if that's in the card anymore.
But it raises the question, and to Carol's point about what happens in the region if the U.S. and Iran agree to something, but Israel's not necessarily party to that.
I'm not quite sure on the nuclear issue that can happen. The Israelis obviously have to be part of it. But in terms of the Gulf traffic, I don't know if the United States and Iran can agree to kind of ensure the safety of the traffic of the Gulf. I think that's an American obligation. I don't put that much stock into the Europeans doing so. And as I said, this is not the case that the president has made. It certainly is not the case because the American people are opposed to this war by a 2-1 margin. That is not a basis for sustained policy in any region, much less in a volatile region such as the Middle East.
So come back to this global insight piece that our team put out there, our Bloomberg Economics team. No peace, no war, the new U.S.-Iran normal. Do we stay maybe in this situation for a lot longer?
Well, we can stay in this situation if we're prepared to absorb the costs in terms of economic penalties, gas prices, and so forth. I'm not quite sure if that's the situation. Well, it's a particularly dire circumstances for the Europeans and for many developing countries, whether it's India, Africa, and so forth. So this is not just about the American economy; it's about the global economy. And that obviously has an effect on how American economy becomes stable or unstable. The Iranians have one advantage. Their economy is a basket case. So they're already living in sort of a primitive economic conditions. But even they have a problem because their economic situation can lend itself to political revolt. And that creates a domestic unrest problem that they would have to deal with. This is not an easy situation for any of the actors involved. The United States seem to have gotten into this war without having clear reasons why. They're not really sure how to prosecute this war that they find themselves in the middle of, and no one has an exit strategy or an off-ramp that they're willing to take.